Hey everybody, Jerome Maldonado. Look, really cool stuff happening in the world all the time. And one of the biggest things that's trending right now, and pipelining. And people don't realize this, but pipelining aligns with real estate hand in hand. So I wanted to talk to you guys about the Trans-Canadian Energy Corporation, which is known as the Keystone XL pipeline, right? And so Trans-Canadian Energy Corp is known as TC Corporation, and for Trans-Canadian. And this is the big thing that's been on Biden's agenda, and this is one of the big things that was on Trump's agenda. And I'll kind of go into the logistics of all that stuff here in just a minute. But how it relates to real estate is that, these pipelines employ tons and tons of people. We're talking thousands upon thousands of Americans. And these pipelines, like the Great American Pipeline out in Alaska that was shut down over a decade ago, and now we have the TC pipeline, the Keystone Extra Long pipeline. And so one of the big things is the extra long pipeline, the XL, is because it's going all the way from the Canadian border up in Alberta down into Nebraska, and then from Nebraska, it's going all the way down to our southern Gulf Coast. And so it's going straight through the United States. Well, you can't just put a pipe down across the United States without dealing with easements and property ownership. And so we have everybody from farm and agricultural landowners. We have all of the Native Americans and running through a lot of native tribes in sovereign land. And then we got personal homeowners and stuff that they have to acquire all this land from. And so when this happens, there's a lot of negotiations behind the scenes that most people don't even realize. You're running straight across an entire country for thousands upon thousands of miles. And, I think the new extension for the extra long one is 1,210 miles. And I think the original Keystone line was someplace in the neighborhood of 1,700 miles. And so miles upon thousands and thousands of miles of pipelining. And negotiations have to go on with these landowners. So they go in, and there's companies that they go in and they negotiate these easements. They get paid out commissions just like real estate brokers. And so being able to find these trends of expected thoroughways for these pipelines is very important. And so not only are we dealing with land and agricultural owners, sovereign land, and personal homeowners, they're negotiating this stuff, and there's money that's made on all this land, easements that are paid out in residual monthly payments to a lot of these landowners for some of the easements that they're purchasing, the commissions that go out to the real estate, the brokers, the people, the land finders, and these guys that are negotiating these deals. But then there's all the workers. And you think about how many we're talking thousands of Americans that are working on these pipelines. And it takes an average American person, somebody who maybe isn't college educated, maybe they are, a lot of them aren't, but it gives them above average wages. They go in, and a lot of these guys are paying union labor wages. So these guys get to make a good living. Some of these guys that would never get a job paying more than $13 an hour, $15 an hour, go in and they're making $25, $30 an hour or better. Working on these pipelines. And so it gives opportunities. Now, one of the big concerns with these pipelines is environmental issues, right? We got to move oil. We got to transport things. And once, I remember my stock guy years ago, he told me, I told him, I want to get into commodities. I love to invest in oil. And so he came back and he said, a lot of these small companies, Jerome, he said, they come and go. The big guys, the big guys like ExxonMobil, these guys control and run all of the oil in the world because they almost have like a monopoly. And so they can inflate or depreciate the value of oil and what they're selling the barrels for and put all these small guys out of business, which is what they do from time to time. Now, they don't quite tell you like that, but he said, Jerome, invest in pipelines. And I said, okay, why pipelines? Because it's like a transport company. And this is at a time when Warren Buffett was buying up the Santa Fe railroads, and he was investing in transport because 18-wheelers, semi-trucks, railway transport, air transport, and pipeline is how we get materials. from one place to another. And so he said, pipelining, you're still in the oil industry. There's always going to be a need to transport oil from overseas. There's going to be a need to transport oil from Canada down across the United States. And so they're always going to be pipelining. They're always going to have to transport. So it's more of a stable industry. Well, look, the Obama administration in 2012 had went in and said, we reject this pipeline, the Keystone XL pipeline. And then in 2015, the Obama administration had been so busy, they kind of ignored it and rejected the permit. So one of the first things in 2016 that was on Trump's agenda was to approve it. Now this permit, you got to understand, this was approved back in March of 2010 originally. And then it was declined by the Obama administration twice, and then Trump brought it in. And it doesn't matter who you like politically. I'm just talking about lives, American lives. And so you can hate Trump, love Trump. You can hate Biden, love Biden. It really doesn't matter. You know, one of the biggest things is understanding how things affect Americans. And I know there's some people in here that are real green, and they'll say, oh yeah, you know, we're agriculturalists. I'm an environmentalist, and I want to make sure that none of that oil spills. Although, like with the Great American Pipeline, they rupture oil in the middle of the ocean, and thousands upon thousands of gallons, if not millions of gallons, when that happened, were deployed into our ocean waters and our fish and all the food that we eat. And it was a big deal for a short period of time, and then it evaporated, right? And so it's gone. And here we sit. There's no signs of any type of environmental issues that are scientifically proven right now from the seepage of oil out of these pipelines. But yet they're shutting down jobs for thousands upon thousands of Americans. And so let's go back in and let's kind of dissect this from square one. And I did a little bit of research. You know, the Keystone Pipeline pumps about 500,000 barrels from Canadian crude, right? And so over 1,700 miles. The new pipeline is projected to do 830,000 barrels of Canadian crude over 1,210 miles. And so, like I said before, it comes down from the Canadian sands of Alberta and it links down to Nebraska. And then what happens is it goes from Nebraska down to the Gulf Coast. And so we're talking about thousands of miles of pipeline. And the reason it's controversial is because they're hitting opposition with environmental groups and because of threats of spills and reducing the oil that's coming out of the Canadian sands. Now, here's the big problem with that is that, you know, the Canadian sands it's the third largest oil exporter in the world, right? Third largest oil exporter in the world. Now, the problem really lays is that even though they're the third largest exporter in the world, they're exporting to one country. They have one buyer, and that's the U.S. and the U.S. government. And so by shutting down this one operation, you shut down the world's third largest producer of oil in the world. And with the U.S. being the only buyer, we have the ability to dismantle this from Canada. So what do you think that does to our relationship with the Canadian Prime Minister and our relationship with our closest ally in the world? Now, Biden's telling us that he's in line with the political plans with Canada, but coming into office the first week and dismantling this doesn't really put us in a good position with the Canadian Prime Minister and Canada in general, because we just now costed the Americans thousands upon thousands of jobs. We just cost Canada, one of our biggest allies, billions upon billions of dollars in revenue. And we're sitting in a position where we have an opportunity to turn it on or off. And you know, my biggest thing with this is, and you know, there is no scientific research on that there's any issues with spills or anything. And so I'm thinking, okay, why don't we do the right scientific research? I think we have a duty and a due diligence to do as Americans to protect our people, right? Because if there is oil spills, these go into our farmlands. It goes into our fruits and vegetables and all our farmlands, and we eat that as Americans, right? And then if we're exporting, other people are eating it all over the world. Plus, it goes into our aquifers and into our water systems. So I get that, So why don't we do scientific research and have engineers? This is the most studied infrastructure project in American history. And so if this is one of the most studied infrastructure projects in American history, why not let the scientists do what the scientists do? Yes, there's always risk, but there's risks pipelining this stuff from the Middle East, across American soil. We're pipelining down south through Texas, all the way up north through Wyoming and in Nebraska, in the Dakotas. And so we have pipelines going. This one gives business and financial stability to one of our closest allies, and it has created all of this political stuff. Now, does this have to do with the fight between the Democrats hating the Republicans and the Republicans not getting along with the Democrats and people hating Trump and not hating Trump or whatever it is? I don't know. All I know is that thousands upon thousands of people were affected by this. And I look at it from a real estate standpoint more so than anything. But then I also look at it as from an employer standpoint. And I sit back and go, okay, in every time there's been a downturn in the economy, I sit back and say, okay, what can I do as an employer to do my due diligence and my job to keep people employed and keep economics moving forward? And so when I look at those things and I ask myself those questions, and then I look at this where you take the third largest oil exporter in the world and you shut them down, what does that do to our economy? Where we're already functioning on 6.7% unemployment rate, now you just overnight shut down the third largest oil pipeline operation in the world. And thousands of people now, in addition to everything else that's happened in the pandemic, you just put them out of work. Now, Canada is going through the pandemic as well. They're facing and battling the exact same issues that we're battling with coronavirus and everything else. And now you just dismantle financially your first week of office. You come in and dismantle that. So, look, there was some negotiations that took place. And my take on this is that there should have been more talk put together on this. Yes, we need to take into consideration the farmers, the ranchers, the Native American groups that were opposing the pipelines due to ecological concerns, aquifers, drinking water, irrigation, stuff like that. But this is a company that was sitting back going, look, we'll invest $1.7 billion into solar, wind, and battery-powered operations to complete the pipeline. We'll go green with this entire operation, and we'll support all of the green codes to do this. Not only that, we'll use 100% union labor to facilitate this, giving jobs back to Americans. Plus, we stay in good communication with our allies, with our closest ally, which is Canada. And so I wanted to kind of bring some of that information to you guys in more so broaden awareness of everything. Because my whole thing in business and in life is about negotiations. I always think there's a happy median, and where maybe if we pose risk and inspectors, if there's a way to inspect these pipelines, and since it is one of the most studied infrastructure projects in American history, it would seem to me that we have the scientists and the professionals at hand to be able to say, okay, this is safe or it's not safe, to inspect these pipelines. I live in a town where there's some pipelines that run not right by our house, but in the vicinity of our municipality. And people come and inspect those pipelines all the time. They check to make sure that there's no oil leaks on those through those pipelines. And the same type of due diligence will be done on these pipelines. And so even though there are concerns, which we understand and appreciate, we have to understand what this does for us economically as well. Is the economic impact greater than what it would if there was a spill, or is it not? We don't know that, but we've been studying it. And instead of just shutting it down, why not put the right people, the right scientists in place to help move this forward? So that way the people that are negotiating the deals on the land, the easements, the people that are receiving the financial benefits of this aren't hit with it, the way the jobs that are created and all the employers that are putting people to unemployment right now aren't affected by it, and just give the world the opportunity to breathe during this time, during this pandemic. And so you can look at it a few different ways. I think a lot of this comes from political standpoints. I'm not a political guy. I try to do things. I would call myself the quiet giant because I hate getting involved in that type of stuff. But I do get irked when I think about how unreasonable some of this some of these vetoes are, and when they're canceling these contracts and stuff without looking at the bigger cause. And I know they've been looking at this stuff, but it seems like they'll sit back and say, okay, this is what we've been objecting. This is why. They don't even look at all the compliance stuff, and then they just shut it down. And so whether you like Biden, don't like Biden and stuff, I wanted to bring you guys some information and just some awareness to the Keystone XL pipeline and the Trans-Canadian Corporation. So I hope you guys find that valuable. You guys want more information on this, click below, give us a big fat thumbs up, subscribe and like us on YouTube, and I'll see you guys on the other side.